But that's interesting because Sun Tzu Miao is called the king of medicine. He's given a very high level. He was also into Neidan. Some people would say he was a hermit, but he was massively involved in politics, if you like. He served at the court, as well as refusing to serve at the court.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Qiological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. I recently read a delightful book on the art of possibility by Benjamin Zander and his wife, Rosamund. He's an orchestra conductor. She's a psychotherapist. Now, I'm not a musician, and so perhaps I have a skewed idea of what a conductor does other than dress in nice tuxedos and wave their arms with emotional passion. I imagine that there is a perfect way to play a piece of music, a technical proficiency like that of a fine Swiss watch. Classical music in particular, I imagined to be more of an enterprise of technique, like a surgeon navigating with a scalpel. What this book pointed out that I'd missed, although in my bones I think I already knew, is that there is a spirit of people coming together in a moment of creation, working together with everything they bring and aiming all that creative energy at an idea that was in the mind of the composer. There is a story about Stravinsky that when a violinist told him that a difficult passage in a violin concerto was virtually unplayable, Stravinsky is supposed to have said, "I don't want the sound of someone playing this passage. I want the sound of someone trying to play it." This so perfectly fits with my experience of practicing medicine. There is a technical perfection that I'm aiming at, and for sure there are times I've firmly got my hands around it. But there are moments, and plenty of them, when I'm struggling to play the passage. I suspect it is those moments that show me my true mettle. It's those moments at the edge of the map when I have to more astutely pay attention. Because I'm in the midst of learning something new, and there is enough uncertainty that my attention slows and widens in the presence of the question, what is this? I suspect we all want to see doctors who can quickly and assuredly say, I know what this is, and I know how to treat it. And I would further venture a guess that we'd like to be that kind of practitioner as well. But I keep coming back to that phrase. I'm looking for the sound of someone who's trying to play this passage. That is what I want to aim at. Whatever ability I might have to be in that frame of mind, that is what I want to cultivate into my work. Alchemy is a curious way of looking at the process of change. It looks both at container and the transformation that occurs within that container. As I think about alchemy, it is rather like Chinese medicine in that we consider the structure, attend to the function, and also put our attention on the interaction of both. In this conversation with Peter Firebrace, we look at how alchemy is a key aspect of change, how restoring what's been forgotten leads to profound transformation, and returning to source and simplicity. Sounds simple, but it's not to be confused with being easy. We'll get into all of this and more in a moment. Stay with us. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AccuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Beardonwalk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lyle, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com, and where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AcuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit AcuFastNeedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
Welcome to Shop Talk. In this portion of the podcast, we are bringing you roughly 15 minutes of practical, clinical methods, perspectives, and advice that has its work boots on. This section is all about practical material that you can begin to investigate the next time that you walk into clinic. Additionally, visit the show notes page for supporting materials from this week's guest on Shop Talk. All right, roll up your sleeves. Let's get to work.
Hello, Shop Talk fans. My name is Brenda Hood, and today I'd like to talk a little bit about Zangfu organs and channels and vessels. First of all, I'd like to point out that the anatomy of Chinese medicine is extremely different than that of Western medicine. And unfortunately, much of our understanding of Chinese medicine has, in ways both subtle and overt, been co-opted by Western biomedical understandings of the body. And I think that we need to understand that this has taken away from our ability to actually fluently use Chinese medicine as a true medical practice. This is not to say that there are not people out there who are amazing at what they do with Chinese herbs, Chinese tuina, and Chinese acupuncture, as well as other related modalities. It's just that if we don't go back to learning how to sync like the people who created the system to begin with, then there's huge sections of things in Chinese medicine that seem to be a complete mystery and don't seem to make any sense at all. The upshot of that in the West has very much been the scrabbling around for different modalities to kind of fill in the holes of the things we think that are missing. And it's not to say that it's a bad thing. I think that it's a necessary thing to happen, but I believe that it needs to happen under the auspices of the overarching understanding of actual Chinese medicine theory, whatever it is that you think that is. The situation is complicated, and this is not really the time and place to talk about such a deep and important issue. But I do want to bring up a couple of things. And one of the things that I've thought a lot about over the course of the years is the dichotomy between the Zangfu organs, our understanding of the Zangfu organs, and the channels and vessels system that we usually understand as being the basis of acupuncture. In the Song Dynasty, there was a big schism and not so much a reorganization as it was a standardization of older theories of Chinese medicine. And a lot of very interesting and important things happened during that time. One of which was that Chinese medicine began to move out of the hands of people who were more hands-on practitioners to people who were more literati. So in Song Dynasty, a man by the name of Chu Xi, who was a Confucian by nature, but who created a whole school of Confucianism called Neo-Confucianism. And one of the important things that he had to say with regards to medicine was that people should learn, or at least men should learn medicine such that they could look after their parents in their elder years, and that this was a very high sign of filial piety, which in that time was a really big deal. And so the Song Dynasty has been a pivotal point in the transitioning of Chinese medicine from older ways of understanding and doing things into ways that we in the West would consider slightly more modern. The problem is that we don't really know much before the Song Dynasty. We have some old texts, but many of the old texts, including the inner canons classical medicine, they're fragmented. They have been edited, and we don't know what is actually original text and what was added on later. They know for sure that there are 2 chapters that are missing, one in the Suan and one in the Lingshu. And so we know that it's written by many people over a course of probably a couple of hundred years, maybe more, and then cobbled together. And then in the early part of the Tang Dynasty, it was reformatted again by Wang Bing. And we don't know much more than that. And that's not to say that it's not the canon of Chinese medicine and that it shouldn't be the canon of Chinese medicine, but we need to look beyond some of the things that are said in that and put it in the larger context of Chinese culture and some of the things in Chinese culture which were part and parcel of what might have been in that book and would have been the background understanding. And so I want to talk about 2 aspects today. The first aspect that I want to talk about is that in the West and in modern China, there is a bit of a bias towards so-called herbal medicine, a bias which began probably in the Song Dynasty. And that bias is that herbal medicine and medicine as practiced by the literati, the Confucians of the time, was somehow more respectable than Chinese medicine that was practiced by the non-literati and people who had more hands-on traditions. This created the schism that Chinese herbal medicine has more respect, even to this day, in mainland China than, say, acupuncturists and acupuncture, which is considered more of a technical skill. And that is not to say that it's exactly the same in North America. I'm just saying that when I was studying there, this is kind of what I saw. And the way that people really seem to treat individuals that were practicing these two modalities of medicine. In the 1950s, a lot of Western medicine got included in Chinese medicine. A lot of Western medicine ideas were used to explain Chinese medicine, to the point where a lot of Chinese medicine was abandoned or refuted, some of which because it didn't fit Marxist theory. I remember studying in Beijing, and in my first book on foundations, they talked about how yin-yang theory was simple dialectical materialism, which, if you know anything about yin-yang theory or dialectical materialism, you understand is quite amusing and not free at all. Regardless, I just wanted to point out that our present understanding of the anatomy of Chinese medicine from a more global view, from a view of the person as an integrated whole, more than just the Zangfu organs given primacy, but also the Zangfu organs and then the sort of more quote-unquote external system of channels and vessels that then helps to regulate the body within a larger system, has fragmented to the point where we kind of stuff things in, trying to say, well, we can use this to explain this. Some of the textbooks that I've read, translated from the Chinese, some written by Westerners, they like to give a lot of Western biomedical explanations for why certain phenomena in Chinese medicine is so. But, that doesn't actually make a lot of sense. It's like trying to explain Chinese grammar using English and then not understanding that you're still not reading Chinese or understanding the Chinese properly because you're now seeing it through the filter of Western medicine. So let's talk a little bit more concrete. So we know that anatomically, Chinese medicine, anatomically speaking, the Zangfu organs are the most internal part of the structure of the body. The Zang organs are the most internal. The Fu organs are slightly external to that. And that is because the Zang and Fu organs act as a system of integrating outside into inside, so that the Fu organs, which are receptive of things coming from the outside for, especially as far as food and break are concerned, process. And the Zang organs, we know according to classical Chinese theory, are areas that store. What do they store? They store essence. They store organ essence. There are three kinds of essence, and I won't get into that right now. If you want to talk to me, just shoot me an email or ask me at some time in the future as to why there are three essences and why we don't talk about them as much, at any rate. And so that's the internal system, not going into specific details of which organ does which. And then we have the channels and vessels. The channels specifically are given the same 5-element attribution as the internal organs. And so when we talk about the lung, for example, we know that from Chinese medicine point of view, the lung is a metal organ and that has all of these other implications. But then we talk about the Tai-yin lung channel, the hand Tai-yin lung channel. We also say, well, that's also a metal channel. And because its main connection to the inside of the body is routed through the lung, that's not wrong. And it is what it says in the inner canon, but that's not the only thing that it says in the inner canon. In the inner canon, they also talk about earthly branches as well. And so when you talk about the earthly branches, all of a sudden what happens is that the hand Tai-yin lung channel then becomes yang wood. There's a reversal or a change in the status of the quality of that channel that is not so discussed nowadays. a lot of people say that, we didn't see any historical records on this and blah, blah, and blah, blah. And so it's not classical. But in a way, it actually is classical because they always talked about stems and branches in the same breath. It was always the same. And this idea that there can be a reversal, especially reversal when you go from one level of what's going on within a system to another level, is extremely common in Chinese medicine. And we've lost that understanding that this can happen. We've also lost the understanding of the implications of the fact that the Zang and Fu organs are an internal system to help assimilate outside into becoming self, where the external system is a system that enables an entity to exist within a larger, changeable environment. So if we're talking about the Tai-Yin system, which is the hand Tai-Yin lung and the foot Tai-Yin spleen, that's a system that helps the body to compensate for dampness. And what you begin to see is that continuous system, sometimes called the same name channel system, sometimes called one of the conformations, there's a number of different names. If you have an individual and that individual moves from an area that's, normally humid to an area that's very humid, it is extremely common that after a few years, that person will begin to develop a lot of damp syndromes, and we will begin to say, their spleen must be weak. When in point of fact, the spleen has probably in this case become affected not so much by what's being taken on inside, but what is actually coming in from the outside. Or it might be some combination of these two. But by not considering the implications of how the body is responding to the external environment and its ability to compensate or not, we begin to lose a big piece of what's going on in the human body. The other thing that I would like to mention in this little talk is that not only is that relationship between the channels and the organs not exactly one-to-one, and that things change with regard to where in the understanding they're considered to be, where in the physical anatomy, the Chinese medicine energetic anatomy they're considered to be, but also the relationship between each of these elements changes considerably. So the channel interactions, the way that the channels work together and how they interact in various forms is extremely complex and is often not really talked about very much when we talk about Chinese medicine theory in school. It's often something that's an addition and add-on. And so, if you just talk about the lung, well, let's consider. So the lung falls in the tidal flow clock. That is the clock which goes around the 24-hour clock. Every 2 hours it changes. And so for some people, I've heard it called the organ clock. I think that's extremely wrong, and that is not how it is referred to in the inner canon. In fact, it is specifically related to the channels and not the organs. And so it's not exactly the same as maybe circadian rhythms or the idea that at this time of day, the liver as an organ is more functional than, say, some other organ in the system. It refers to the idea that the Zhen liver channel is most active or least active at given times of the day. And so when you have this idea of being most active or least active in the tidal flow clock, you begin to get this idea of clock opposites. And that relationship of clock opposites then begins to have significant impact in how you would think about something that was going on with the Zhen liver channel. And so if you have the Zhen liver channel and at the liver time of day, you begin to see that channel, which is between 1 and 3 in the morning, there's something wrong going on there. Then you have to decide, well, is it because the channel is hyperactive? Is it because the channel is hypoactive? I mean, is it in excess or is it deficient? And then what you have to do is figure out, well, if I want to address it Am I going to get the best results by addressing this directly, or will I get better results by looking at the clock opposite and deciding that I need to tonify or disperse that in order to correct whatever imbalance there is in that particular channel? One of the things that many people who are herbalists and who have only a first or second year understanding of Chinese medicine theory are probably not terribly aware of. But in the Ling Shu chapter 10, there is an entire section. It's all about the channels and the specific issues that can arise when you talk about the channels. And the channels are not talked about just as though they are deficient and excess. In fact, when it talks about it in the channels, a better translation of that first line would be, rather than pathological changes in the channel itself result in blah, 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 a better translation of that would be, if the channel is aroused, if somehow it is stimulated, it's as though the qi in the channels has been disturbed in some way, and it is no longer smoothly flowing. And then they go on to talk about, and if it is in excess, then blah, blah, and if it is deficient, then blah, blah. And so it talks about actually 3 different stages, not just the 2 stages that we commonly use to refer to zang and fu organs in the body. And so if we don't understand the differences and the fact that the different interactions between the channels are a very, very important part of Chinese medicine anatomical theory, then we're never going to be able to really get down into what's going on in the body, and we're always going to be at the point of having to turn to other modalities to figure out what's going on in our own medicine. Thank you very much for listening. That's all I have to say for today.
Brenda offers mentoring. You can reach out to her at harmonyhealth.ca@gmail.com. Peter Firebrace, welcome to Qiological.
Thanks a lot, Max.
You know, it's so amazing. We've got this medicine that has come down through the centuries, and dynasties and all these different places. And now we've got the capacity to talk about it over Ethernet all over the world. We can be sitting in completely different places and figuring out this stuff that we practice.
Yeah, it's a fantastic opportunity for massive further growth. No, because, these ideas could go out much faster. Yeah, it's been millennia, as you say, and it's been, quite a long, slow, very nice Chinese-style, well-organized grind. But now the sky's the limit, I agree.
Yeah, well, maybe we're like the Tang Dynasty of, the old times. Lots of trade and arts and communication.
No, it's very interesting. Of course, it could be a multiplication of not the best side of Chinese medicine. That's also a possibility, where a lot of things could be lost. But on a positive note, things could be shared much more easily and could be received worldwide. Absolutely.
Yeah. And stored.
And stored, exactly.
It's not like some bamboo scroll that's getting moldy in some grave.
Yeah, but a lot of those bamboo scrolls, they lasted a couple of thousand years. They did well. What's this recording going to be like in a couple of thousand years?
Well, I don't even know what it's going to be in 10 years. I remember when CDs came out, and it was like, ooh, the new technology, everything in the world, all the knowledge of the world will be on CDs forever. And then CDs were gone in 5 years.
I know. As a musician, I know. It's not funny.
Well, it is funny, actually. We have these plans and we think things are going to go a certain way. And then we get to the future and realize, that was not right.
Yes, but a CD was, it was something you owned. You had the CD, and so long as you had a machine you could play it on, it was there. It's like a book. If everything goes online, you also have nothing.
I know. I rent my music these days.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah, but if you can't afford to rent it, then you have no music. Whereas if you have a load of CDs, you could keep playing them if you wanted to. But it's another story.
Well, it is another story, but, look, I can rent it for less than what I used to pay for one CD. I can rent a month of music for less than what it would cost for one CD. And I used to buy more than one CD a month. And now I've got access to approximately everything for that same price. The multiplier is amazing.
It is amazing. Yeah, you have access to pretty much all the music that's been recorded. It is amazing, I agree.
And it was not that long ago that trying to get some information about Chinese medicine in English, that was really hard.
Yeah, 40 or 50 years ago, yes. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, 40, 50 years is not a long time.
No, it's all good.
The future's not bad. Anyway, we're here not to talk about the future today, although we might anyway. We're here to talk about alchemy. Alchemy of the organs. I saw that you had a series of classes that you're doing. And I saw the title, Alchemy of the Organs. And, I'm one of these kinds of people where I see something and either it doesn't land at all or I don't pay attention or I notice it and I'm like, oh, alchemy of the organs. That sounds cool. I need to get Peter Firebrace on here. I want to talk about that.
It is cool. I agree. And I wonder why more people aren't into it, actually. Especially, thinking a bit about, you've refocused me on the whole subject, coming to talk to you here. And what I realized is it's certainly for the major teachers, it was either a part of Chinese medicine or such a closely allied subject that it was considered, if not essential, then extremely helpful. I'm thinking of Li Shizhen in his book on the 8 Extraordinary Meridians, and Sun Miao, who is the king of medicine for the Chinese. So it's interesting, a lot of people who are into Chinese medicine, a lot of colleges, they've probably got a Tai Chi class or a Qigong class. I don't know any college that has a Neidan class. Maybe that's because who's going to teach it? I think that is possibly a problem.
Well, you need someone who knows something about that.
Yes, but you could say, why don't more people know something about that? Is it because Chinese medicine has only been with us for, 50, 60 years or so? Are we just at the beginning, so we don't realize the things that are around it or behind it? Like the I Ching, for example, is another good example. Maybe if you tested all the practitioners on the 8 trigrams, just what is this? What is this? What is this? Just write the lines. How well would people do on that? Would it be a few esoteric people who would know that 3 lines is heaven, 3 yin lines is earth, or would it be more? I don't know. But Sun Miao said that you had to study the I Ching to be a practitioner. If you look at Sun Miao's list, it's a big list of what he thinks people should do before becoming a practitioner. You can find it in Sabina Wilms's book or other translations. It's big. And you're expected to be a well-educated, well-rounded, thoughtful, almost introverted person who is thinking about the nature of life as much as about the nature of how to fix your next patient. So it's like if you're going to fix the next patient, then you need to have oiled some kind of wheels in there already. So you're in the right state of mind. So it's just strange. It's just strange, I think.
Here's something else to consider. You just use that term, fixing a patient. We use that term all the time. We fix patients. Do we? Do we actually fix patients? Or do patients re-regulate themselves through whatever interaction is that we're having with them, with needles, conversation, herbs, diet, so on? Who's doing the work here? Where's the healing come from?
I think it depends what the mode of treatment is. I mean, personally, I do acupuncture and massage, for example. And when I'm doing the massage, I do feel I'm doing more myself than if I'm just putting needles in, or if I'm doing some moxa or putting a heat lamp on, or just talking. I think there's a continuum through all of that. I understand, the tendency now is we don't fix anything, but we facilitate fixation. And maybe we do. That's a hard thing to say, because I think there are people that I would like to see if I get sick. And unfortunately, there are people that I would rather, it would be hard for me to go and see them, even if they're on the register of acupuncturists or whatever. It's not only that they've done the training. I want some, I don't know what it is I'm looking for. I'm comfortable with the person, more than comfortable. But am I fixing myself? Yeah, ultimately, probably yes. But why couldn't I have done it on my own?
Well, that's a really good question. And I think about that a lot. Because if we have that capacity, and I think I'm not alone in this, when I talk to patients, I tell them that the capacity to get better is within them. And I do believe that.
But do you then close the appointment?
No, I do not close the appointment because while the capacity is within them, and it's like, I think we sometimes get lost from ourselves, or our body gets confused, or we get in these loops or habits or all kinds of things. And so we become a bit disconnected from our Zheng Qi, right? Or we get some disturbance with our Wei Qi, or there's something going on with the way the organs are talking to each other. They're actually not talking to each other. Maybe they're having an argument. Maybe they're ganging up on another organ system.
So what, in your view, is the role of the practitioner in that then?
That's a great question. First of all, something incredibly potent with acupuncture, or can be incredibly potent with acupuncture.
I agree.
Amazing. And it has the capacity to reinvigorate aspects of the body and mind. I hate that word body-mind and, body-mind connection. It's not a connection. Like body and mind completely inextricably entangled. It's an entanglement. And so somewhere in that entanglement, things get knotted up, literally knotted up. And we see, jia, right? You see that in the Chinese language. We talk about knotted qi. Yeah, the entanglement gets knotted up. There's something about the acupuncture that brings a kind of stillness. And that stillness reawakens capacities that people already have. And how the practitioner goes about figuring out where to put the needles and what to do with them, it's like, I don't know. We've got our theories, we've got our ways of working. There are certainly systems and, people teaching those systems. And then there's the conglomeration of whatever it is that you put together over the years as a practitioner that, for me, allows me to track, where is this person? And where am I with this person? And what is this person telling me? So I can give you an example. I had a person in yesterday, came in for shoulder pain. And then very quickly find out, there was a miscarriage recently, but it wasn't a huge deal. I was like, sorry to lose, a kid, but I'm super fertile. I'll get pregnant again. No big deal. Then, a little bit further in, it's like, there's all this blood stasis. It's all in the lower jowl. And just through the conversation from shoulder to who I am and where I've been the past couple of months, just the patient telling me and the various health things, it's like, oh, I see. Blood stasis in the lower jaw. And from a Sa'am acupuncture perspective, it's very easy to have blood stasis and accumulations in the lower part of the body, especially for kidney constitution people. And this woman was really kidney constitution. And it's just like, oh, there it is. I think I see it. Some Shrefu Juyutang, some points here. She's probably going to be fine. She'll probably be pregnant again in 6 months. And it's like I'm going to call it a conversational unfolding. I'm kind of rambling here. Does that answer your question?
Well, my question was, what is the practitioner's role?
It's a great question, and I want to answer it. The practitioner's role is to immerse themselves in medicine and then want to be helpful. There's got to be a desire to be helpful to other people. And then a capacity to show up and listen and be very comfortable with uncertainty, because there's a lot of uncertainty that the patient experiences and the practitioner experiences, and to be able to sit with that uncertainty and not get tossed away by it, not get thrown away by it, not go into all kind of mentation and abstraction. Oh, I've got this theory, I got that theory. Sit and wait until something, a pattern kind of appears. Not trying to force a pattern onto it. It's more a little bit like cooking. You use a certain kind of flame, and then you add some spices and you taste it. Oh, is this what I'm looking for? Ooh, no, not salty enough. Let's add some salt. Something like that.
Yeah. Because what I was interested in, since we've gone this way, is what is a practitioner? What is a practitioner's training? And in the context of this podcast, should it include Neidan alchemy, at least in its basic outline? Should it include a basic study of the I Ching? I'm not saying it should, I'm saying should it?
I hear your inquiry here, and Sun Tzu Miao would say yes.
But that's interesting, because Sun Tzu Miao is called the king of medicine. He's given a very high level. He was also into Neidan. He was, some people would say he was a hermit, but he was massively involved in politics, if you like. He served at the court, as well as refusing to serve at the court. He had at least 100 years' life, as far as we can see, maybe much longer. He was an unusual person, very bright mind, very active, and this is important, I think, long-lived. And the long life, or we could put it the Chinese way, immortality, is one of the reasons for studying Neidan. Because we're not in Waidan, external alchemy, which may be to create a precious metal or gold or something. We're into what is most precious within a human being, which is to be a conscious, connected, healthy, and I would say helpful person for a long time. And maybe that's a very simple view, but that is certainly part of the study of Neidan. And I think that we already see it partly if there is a Qigong class or if there's Tai Chi class. A lot of the exercises that are done, in a way, part of that Neidan stream. So it's not like it's all disappeared, but the name doesn't exist at all. Is there any Chinese medicine acupuncture college out there that has alchemy in its, one of the keynotes in its curriculum? I think not.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something That's never easy, but sometimes necessary. Raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code CHEOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Peter, it's increasingly getting to the point where you're not going to find a school with a name like Oriental Medicine or Chinese Medicine. You're going to see schools with names like School of Integrative Medicine. I would say if anything, we're going further afield from gazing more deeply into the tradition that we come from. We're looking more into how can we sort of glue ourselves onto the conventional system with its particular view and integrate with that rather than integrate with our history and ourselves and our practice. At least that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that. I'm not very familiar with what's going on in the States. I teach quite a lot within Europe, and some people are very interested in that in Europe as well. I think that is fine so long as the essentials of Chinese medicine, and then we have to discuss what they are not lost in the process.
Yes. And I would say too, Peter, since we're having the discussion, the essentials of Neidan, because we hear a lot about Qigong. Of course, we hear a lot about Tai Chi. Qigong's a big thing these days.
Which I think is great. People are actually doing something, and yeah, I think it's great.
Right. But Neidan is different yet again. We're talking about alchemy, which I think might even make some people very nervous in our modern world of evidence-based medicine. Alchemy? Like, what are you guys up to?
That is so interesting, because I remembered something really important within the Western tradition, which is that, and because I think not many people know this, but Isaac Newton, one of the top physicists and scientists, was massively interested in alchemy. And his last unpublished book, that was the topic of it. And he was very interested in alchemy, even though it may be different to the Neidan of the Chinese. But he kept it secret, because he didn't want people to know that he was studying it and putting his very clever, genius mind to it. And that's a little bit the same as what you just said. Some people from the outside can say, well, what's this alchemy doing on a Chinese medicine course? What's that got to do with anything?
How's that going to help me pass the board exam?
Well, you could say the key aspect of alchemy is change. And the key aspect of medicine is change, that they have something very, very strongly linked. And the processes of alchemy are not easy, just as the healing of difficult illnesses is also not easy and requires a clear understanding of how life should be, because you're trying to restore the patient to what they consider to be them. They've lost them somewhere along the line, and they need help to get back to that.
So you just used a really interesting word here. And I want to come back to what we were talking about earlier about fixing people, right? It's what we often say. But you just used the word restore. What we're looking to do is restore. You're asking me about how I think about working. I was trying to come up with a word that I struggled with and ultimately failed. I could talk around it, but you just put your finger right on it. Acupuncture can help to restore people to a capacity that they have.
Yeah. Very interesting, because if you look at Neidan, one of the key features of Neidan, different Chinese terms for it, one is fan, means to return. It's a kind of reversal process. When we live in life in something going from inside to outside, from yin to yang, from simplicity to complexity, getting all the more differentiated all the time. And the process of Neidan is the opposite of that. It's to go from the outside back to the inside, to go from all this multiple creations back to the source. It's a return to the source. It's to restore someone back to their connection with the yuan, with the source. So it's the same process, but you are trying to restore yourself. And the interesting thing with Neidan is that it's not Waidan. Waidan could be with drugs or with potent substances. Neidan, you have absolutely nothing in the pot except your own organs and your own Jing, Qi, and Shen. You have only what you have within you. There are no external helpers anywhere, but you can do it with the wonder of what is apparently immaterial. That's very Chinese to me.
It is very Chinese. The wonder of what's immaterial. Okay.
But that's very, very Taoist. Lao Tzu and Chuang-Tzu, emptiness, silence. It's always at the top.
Yes, emptiness. Well, before we started rolling some tape today, we were talking about mindfulness.
A misnomer.
Yes, a misnomer. You went on a little tirade, actually, about mindfulness.
Should be mind emptiness.
It should be mind emptiness. We're aiming at mind.
For Taoists, anyway. For Taoists.
Yeah. Okay, for Taoists. Fair enough. Yeah, those Taoists are tricky. Taoists are very slippery, aren't they?
I think they're very, very clever, because they realize that there's nothing better than to be full of emptiness, or to be, full of nothing. This search for the wu, which has no form. Forget the Tai Chi, go for the Wu Chi. And I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, you can't.
No, you can't. No.
But you have brilliant thinkers and writers and teachers like Chuang-Tzu. He's so brilliant in his mind, and he can just take you there in a story. That, to me, that's genius.
So I want to talk about language just a little bit for a moment. And then we'll come back to alchemy. And I do want to get to alchemy and the organs. We're headed there. We're slowly meandering in that direction. It seems to me, because as humans, by and large, we live within the constructs of language. We live within words. On occasion, our senses can open in a way, and our spirit is open in a way, and we can get something of the world that comes through, and it's not language. It's a different kind of knowing. It doesn't come through our constructs. It's rare, especially the older we get. It's rare. And so it seems to me that the words that we use, it's like we have to be cautious with them. And I think a very good example is what we were just talking about here. Instead of thinking about mindfulness as a way of getting to emptiness or stillness or quiet, like mind emptiness, like even to have that idea of mind emptiness, Peter, that already aims me in a different direction.
Yeah, it does. I mean, if you think of the word shi in Chinese, you have shu and shi, empty and full. The full is a kind of pathology. So, mindful, is that a good thing? I mean, it's a big discussion. What is meditation? I personally, I like the Zen and the Taoist, which is a kind of Chinese, Japanese Taoist Buddhism, where you throw away everything material in the end. If you're cold, you sit there and you burn the Buddha statue to keep warm. That's anarchistic and dangerous to some people. But why? Maybe it's important that you keep warm. Does it matter if the sacred Buddha is burnt or not? The Buddha's not in the sacred Buddha.
The Buddha in the sacred Buddha is not the Buddha.
Well, I think you've just made a koan. No, but I mean, although we joke, I think that this aspect of emptiness is so important. And we have problems with language, which you were talking about. And I do it all the time. We're talking about points, acupuncture points. Well, they're not points in Chinese. Shui is a hole. It's a hollow. It's an empty space. And the only reason we can live is because we have holes. We have a hole here, we call a mouth, and we have two holes here which let in the air. And we have two holes in our ears that let in sound, and we have two holes for the eyes. Without those, there's no beginning to life. It's the emptiness that gives life.
Well, it's the emptiness that makes like a cup useful for coffee.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's the emptiness that that allows the fullness of life in. Anyway, as you can see, I've become fixated on emptiness.
You're full of emptiness. Wait a minute.
Well, that's it though, isn't it? That is it. Is that the village idiot or the sage? And if you watch those martial arts movies, of which the Chinese just have hundreds, probably thousands, like, America's got so many Westerns. The well-organized soldiers, they always get beaten up by the drunken beggar or, the guy who is just picking up vegetables.
Well, order is very susceptible to chaos.
The point is that these people have trained their whole lives. And it's no problem for them to take on whatever it is, 15 armed soldiers or whatever, because they know what they're doing. And they know what they're doing because they've been doing things like Neidan, even if they wouldn't call it that. They have been honing their abilities. And they've reached a level of perfection that most of us absolutely do not have. And they can defend themselves, they can attack seemingly, just ridiculous odds. And this is part of the Chinese, Japanese, Eastern tradition. The one against the many. Because the one has been trained so well.
I mean, we have those stories in the West as well.
Yeah, we do. Absolutely.
We do. And usually it's not because the one has been trained, but it's because the one has gone off on some hero's journey kind of thing. And actually, they are coming apart at the seams. And that coming apart is, like the Star Wars is, of course, classic for that, right? It's an old story in so many places. But yes, there's this big unraveling usually that goes with it. So when we come to something like Neidan, first of all, can you give me an idea of what some of those practices are? And given the possibility that if you're really going to do some alchemical change on the inside, there's going to be some unraveling that goes on. How do you get through that? Because in all the hero stories that I've come across, there's someone who helps guide you through that unraveling. Something shows up. Otherwise you're lost.
I think that's true. I think you have a teacher. And that's maybe why there's not so much talk of Neidan, because it was maybe only taught to people who had the possibility of reaching the goal, which would not be all of us. You need not only the possibility, but a kind of focused mindset and ability to go through, great difficulties and face your weaknesses, to take on the hero's journey aspect. So I don't think it's for everyone, although I think it would be nice for everyone to know, A, it exists, and B, a lot of the things are not so different from Chinese medicine. I'm studying it as a practitioner and as a human being. But I don't have a teacher, so I'm a novice. I'm the wrong person to ask on your podcast. Although I may be an interesting person because I have an interest, even though I'm not trained. You could surely also find people who are trained.
Yes. One of the things I love about doing the podcast, look, sometimes I talk with people highly, highly trained. And sometimes I talk with people, they're in the midst of their process of learning. And there's a lot of goodness in that. Look, most of us are starting off the beginning of anything, not knowing much. You called yourself a novice. You don't have a teacher. You're a novice. You're at the beginning of the training. There's something that's caught your attention, and there's something that you're following. What is that? What caught your attention, and what are you following at this point? As a novice, maybe a teacher shows up, but as a novice, what's that path look like?
I think I've always been interested in ways of setting myself on a path, and I'm going to use the word full here, to become a full human being. And I've always had an interest in Eastern things, yoga, meditation, as well as Western mystical things as well. I don't know why, but I'm attracted to philosophical ideas and especially systems where you follow along, you train yourself, and that seems to be very important. I mean, to take an easy example, part of the Neidan tradition is what usually seems to be called the microcosmic circuit, or the small heavenly cycle.
Yeah, I think we all hear about that in our first or second day of Tai Chi class, don't we?
Yeah, but that's interesting. You see, I would say that the Neidan part of the Neidan is in the Tai Chi class, and it's in the Qigong class, and it may be in any meditation class, not necessarily Chinese, because this microcosmic orbit restores, use that word, the fullness of Ren and Dumai as a unit, not as yin on the front, yang on the back, but as one ever-circling circuit. And within the part of your training may be to visualize yourself in these particular, what are usually called the 9 openings, which are the 3 Dan Tian elixir cinnabar fields, the 3 passes on the spine, the 2 magpie bridges, I'll come to what they are in a minute, and the vertex. Those are 9 key opening points on the body. And in your training, you go from one to the other, and you restore something that has been left and forgotten in your daily life. And to restore it in restoring it, you recapture that ever-circling, deepest yin-yang core central flux, getting you part of the way back, that return, reversal, to where you came from. Because I think Neidan is, I don't like to put it as a series of techniques, but in the end it does kind of come to that, where you get back to the source that gave you life in the first place. Meaning that you then have good health, long life, you're serene, you're able to cope, you're quick-witted, and retain the agility of a child. All of these are part of what sounds grand, but I'm going to call it anyway, the true master actually is. It's a quality of being, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So I'm sorry, that was a very long sentence, because you asked for some kind of example in Neidan. And the microcosmic orbit is something a lot of people have heard about, even if they've never experienced it. And you can immediately see that these are massively important focus points, maybe holes, on the body, which are also acupuncture points.
And beyond that, they are channels. They are conduits.
Yeah.
You were just talking about the Ren and the Du not as separate channels.
Exactly. They're two in one and one in two, as Li Shizhen says.
But as a unified whole.
Exactly.
Beyond their complementary so-called opposites, it's gone from parts to whole.
Absolutely. And that's a nice and very important aspect of restoring the whole. And you're no longer thinking in yin-yang. You've gone beyond the dual. You were talking about that circle.
It also invites us out of duality.
Yeah.
And into, I don't think I have quite the right word, a sense of unity, and like maybe somewhere permeating in there, the mortar between the bricks is your is your nothingness, your emptiness.
The journey to emptiness is very interesting, I think, because and this is another part of the Neidan training, using the 3 Dan Tian. So the lower Dan Tian is the Jing, the middle Dan Tian is the Qi, the upper Dan Tian is the Shen, and beyond that is the Tao, or maybe the Wu.
Hard to say when you can't say.
Well, quite. That's the first sentence of the Tao Te Ching, isn't it? I can't remember it, but it's something like, he who knows does not say, or he who speaks is... You know it.
道可道，非常道.
Exactly.
The Tao you can speak, that ain't it. If you can say it, that ain't it. It's very frustrating as a human.
My own feeling is that Lao Tzu stopped there, but his publisher said, well, we can't sell this as a book.
That's not a book. You promised me 80 chapters, dude. Get writing.
That's all you need. And he was right, of course.
So you used a really evocative term. The journey to emptiness is through the 3 Dan Tian.
It's emptiness, but it's the emptiness from which the whole of life comes. You know, we have to be careful in the same way we were careful with the word fullness. You know, is it just crammed so full that there's, nothing can breathe? And is emptiness, we usually think of that, especially in Chinese medicine, as a dearth, something lacking. This Wu, emptiness, is, for lack of a better term, it's the void from which all life comes. It's a very potent emptiness. And that's the journey back to what gave us birth in the first place. So it's a return home. Neidan is a journey home. Even, however difficult the practice is, however complex, however the organs are involved, it's a journey back to where material came from. And that may be a problem in integrative medicine, because that Wu is really the basis of Chinese medicine. Beyond yin-yang to the Tai Chi, and beyond the Tai Chi to the Wu Chi, which is the infinite, I think would be the best Western term. And I don't think that's a problem, actually, for physicists.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner, because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital qi, and that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of chi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
I think physicists 100 years ago put their finger on this. I think they were seeing it.
Yeah.
I do. Where I think it gets a little tricky for us in our modern moment, especially as we live and work in the world and have to make a living and connect with and communicate with other people and make our way in this world of form and relationships. That's the world of Xing. That's the world of form. And conventional medicine, really good at Xing, like really good at it.
But it has limitations.
It has limitations. Well, everything has limitations. There's that. What I think I'm beginning to see here is that at its root, conventional medicine is a medicine of Xing. And at its root, Chinese medicine, East Asian medicine, Oriental medicine, whatever you want to call, whatever we're calling it this week, its root is Wu.
I think maybe the root is Wu, but we have to remember, Chinese herbs, that's the most fantastic understanding of form and forms. I don't think the Chinese, I'm not sure that they are going only for Wu. The world is made up of Wu and Yo. There's having as well as not having. And I just think that their understanding of herbs, and which is really material, it is just material, it is just substance. It's just as complex in its own way as Western pharmaceutics, even though they may be, here we go, artificial.
Synthesized,
yeah. But I think there's a very interesting and fruitful discussion to be had. I think my fear of the integrative medicine model is if Chinese medicine, maybe even all the so-called alternative methods, are slid in under an operative Western system. I don't think that works, because homeopathy, for example, is also in a way a medicine of Wu with the potencies, and is not understood and is abused.
Yeah, I didn't mean to suggest, although I think I did, that our medicine is based on ooze, based on no form.
Okay. Maybe sorry, I reacted.
Well, no. I think we're puzzling this out, and part of the way that I puzzle things out is I say something and then I see where I've missed the mark. So, in some ways, our medicine at its base is ooh, great. That's an aspect and a thing to look at. But look, I got this lovely cup here, and it's got this empty space inside. But the thing that makes the cup really useful and brings it to life is when it's got coffee in it. So I've got the emptiness with the fullness together, much in the way that I think you were just talking about the Du and the Zhen. And we can look at them separately, and they have functions separately, and there are ways that we might even want to work with them separately. There's a reality to be seen there. And then there's also the unity, and that gives you yet another perspective. I'm not saying there's only one perspective. It seems like, well, is it the Taoists who say it's turtles all the way down? You know, we have all these interlocking, interpenetrating levels of things that work together. I know we're getting a little off in the weeds here.
But I think these are important questions. And what is nothing anyway? No, but, can you define nothing? Or is it just the absence of everything?
I find it very hard for my conceptual mind to grasp nothing.
Exactly.
So maybe we can ground this in the alchemy of the organs. Let's ground this into the organs. Tell us a little more about alchemy of the organs. It's taken us a while to come round to this.
Yeah. Well, the organs is another set of things. I mean, there are two things we've looked at. We've looked at the microcosmic orbit, let's call it that. And then we looked a bit briefly at Jing transforming into Qi, transforming into Shen, transforming into Dao or Wu. That's a part of Neidan. And then you have the cauldron of the organs, because they are sometimes represented within a cauldron, a bit like a cooking pot. And you have the heart on the top, the kidneys below, and the liver and lung at the sides. And very importantly, the spleen and the yi, attention, intention, in the middle, which is also the five elements: fire with water, metal, wood and metal, and the earth. And in Neidan, I think another aspect, a bit like the Ren and the Du are one, two in one that is one. Yeah, you can divide it up and say one is yin and one's yang, but you can do the same in a day. There's midday and there's midnight, but they're both parts of the day. And I think that this is this unitative process of Neidan, which it's in itself healing, because you're always going back to the root, back to the source, back to unity, and away from multiplicity. So within the organs, heart and kidney are fire and water, Li and Kan. And the green dragon of the Eastern Sea is what in Chinese medicine we call the liver. And the white tiger of the Western mountains is what in Chinese medicine we call the lungs. And this is also very typical, that you have this coded language, very typical of alchemy. So it's not the heart, but the red bird, Miao. It's not the kidneys, but the dark, two-headed stag or deer. And these are expressed as the divinity of the heart is the red bird. The Shen, the divinity of the kidneys, is a dark Xuan, meaning coming from the primal, original darkness, two-headed deer. So suddenly we are into the world of the imagination. And the phoenix is a multicolored phoenix with outstretched wings. We are far from learning about spleen, qi, shu. And the imaginative people in the class are going, yeah, this is what I came for. And the perhaps more scientific people are saying, but when are we going to learn the syndromes? And I think, there are people who are more imaginative and people who are more exact. I'm not saying that all imaginative people are not exact, but let's put those two out there. Anyway, the organs are a little bit like we had from Jing to Qi to Shen to Dao. We have, how do you unify the heart and the kidney? How do you unify the liver and the lungs? The liver is always moving and moving upward. The lung is always moving and moving downward. To put it most simply, the three hun, reaching for the immaterial, for sure. They're trying to get, or not trying to get, but they can leave the body. The seven po cannot leave the body, and they will die with the body, because they are what keep the body alive, opening and closing the little doors, sometimes linked to the seven doors on the digestive tract. So they're very, very different. Liver and lung are really different, just like east and west is different, or spring and autumn.
Just like Ren and Du are different, and a unity.
Exactly, but they are a unity. You can't have a spring without an autumn, or if you do, it's not life as we know it. And the same way, you cannot have midwinter without midsummer. You cannot have midnight without noon. And this is what I kind of love about the Neidan people, because they're trying to see beyond material to the unity that created it. And the Neidan journey is the journey back. It's often called the path of reversal, to follow your steps back to where you came from, which doesn't die, which is why there's a lot of talk not only about long life, but immortality, which is another no word in many ways.
It seems to me that, I think that word immortality is very, like many Taoist things, it's slippery, it's tricky. Does it mean live forever in your current conglomeration of thought and construct and concept? Or is it, like you were saying, stepping back to something more essential that's always there? We come out of it, we go into it.
It's kind of beyond life as well as the inherent center of life.
The inherent center of life, but like ego and construct crumbles to dust in its presence, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's where you need a Neidan graduate.
A graduate.
I think you should put that out on your, having talked to Peter Firebrace, you're now in search of a Neidan graduate. There will be people out there. Of course there will.
Yes, I don't think they advertise themselves as such.
They may feel the time has come. We don't know.
We don't know.
I think the concepts of Neidan, never mind whether you're doing the steps and stages or not, I think they are uplifting. For me, I'm just talking for myself. They're uplifting and they resolve disunity for me. Even if I can't understand exactly what they're talking about in the text, and the texts are difficult to read, whether you're Chinese or not. It's a coded language, and sometimes they use lead for the kidney and mercury for the heart, for example. There's a whole world of its own in there.
That's interesting. Lead and mercury, I just take the image of those two.
Uh-huh.
And with lead, it's heavy, it's dull, it's very of the earth. And with mercury, also known as quicksilver. It looks a lot like lead, but it's hanlinghua, right? It's lively and it reflects and it moves and it's in constant motion. It's the opposite of lead.
And it's within cinnabar. Cinnabar is mercury sulfide.
But we're not really eating cinnabar.
No.
No. I mean, this is, I think, where it gets really tricky.
But that's Waidan, if you're eating something.
Yes, that's Waidan. And the Neidan is being able to go into those images and that imaginal world.
Yeah, but the requirement for Neidan is such a level of, it's the wrong word, but I'll use it anyway, self-control or self-guiding. I mean, the heart is central to all of this, which is interesting. And the heart in the, there's a picture, there are two famous Neidan pictures. One is the inner landscape, Neijing 2. I don't know if you know it. That's difficult about a podcast. And the other is the cultivation of authenticity. These are two Taoist maps, which are written out, because they're pictures, on the back stones of the Baiyunguan, the White Cloud Temple in Beijing.
That temple has Sun Tzu Miao's very famous quote inscribed in stone on it.
Okay, what does it say?
I don't remember it, but it's the famous thing about how to be a doctor and how you should behave and the people that you see and treat folks like your family, and yeah, that's also there. It's written in stone.
Yeah, well, that's has been the center of Taoism. There are different Taoist sects, there's north, there's south, but that has been a center of Taoism since Genghis Khan, because Genghis Khan gave the abbot the temple and the power to spread the word, as it were. And these two pictures, the inner landscape picture and the one to cultivate authenticity, are there. And they're kind of probably early 19th century, but they are part of the whole development of Neidan, which probably started about the 2nd century AD with the first book. And there have been different books, a bit like there have been in Chinese medicine. There are also Neidan books, important ones. So it's a living tradition. There are practitioners, if you like, even though if we don't know their names, and there's not a central registry, as far as I know, of Neidan practitioners.
The registry of Neidan practitioners is not the registry of Neidan. Peter, this sounds like Fight Club.
Yeah, but I think it's actually either an essential part or an essential, is the word corollary? Is that the right word there?
I don't know, but I like it.
To Chinese medicine. And I think the fact that Sun Tzu Miao was a practitioner and Li Shizhen in the 16th century was either a practitioner, because he quotes Zhang Boduan's book on internal alchemy in his book on the 8 extraordinary meridians, which is quite interesting because that is at a deep level of, it's not the 12 meridians, it's the 8 extraordinary meridians. And I think the fact that these two primary source teachers were interested in Neidan shows it's
a hint.
It's more than a hint. I think it's really more than a hint. And there is a nice translation of the book by Mikishima and Charles Chase.
Yes, the exposition of the 8 extras.
Exactly. Yeah, which is about 10 years ago, I think. And they do a very nice explanation of Neidan. I think for acupuncturists who want to get into it more, that is a very nice book because it will relate into their understanding of the 8 extraordinary meridians. I can't think of any book that I know of which talks about Neidan and Chinese medicine. There are some good authors on Neidan, which I can give you, or we can put at the end if people want to go further.
Yes, well, we can send those to me. I will make sure they get on the show notes page.
Yeah. They're very good in French, actually. I'm lucky I speak and understand and can read French.
Yes, well, we're Amerikanskis for the most part over here, so English would be helpful.
Some of those books have been translated into English, but there are some good books.
Yeah. Send us your library. I'll make sure it's on the show notes page.
I'll put just a few key books and a key website. Yeah, because it's people can certainly go further on their own. They can certainly go further on their own.
And I'm very curious about this cultivation of authenticity that you're talking about. It's the first time I heard you say it. Earlier in the conversation, you used the phrase full human, to become a full human. We were kind of joking about fullness and emptiness and at that moment. But the character for full human, I think, you might be thinking this, in Chinese is Zhen Ren, right? Like authentic, genuine person, authentic person.
It's exactly that character.
Yes, exactly that character. It means genuine, authentic.
Exactly.
And so cultivation of authenticity, that sounds like a pretty good place to start as well.
Absolutely. It's a fantastic picture. There is one fantastic book. It's only in French. So you either have to know Chinese or French. It's Catherine Desper, who is very good on this subject. And there's another French author, Isabelle Robinet, who wrote a lot about internal alchemy. Because, it's at least 2,000 years old now, with books that came. In a way, The Secret of the Golden Flower is also one of those books.
This is the Wilhelm...
Yes, although Thomas Cleary did a translation of it, because he said that they were working from not a good source and stuff. But yeah, it's Wilhelm's. That's right.
I had a copy of that book years ago. I remember coming across it. It was an old book when I found it. And I was like, ooh, Secret of the Golden Flower. I must have been in my early 20s. Like, Secret of the Golden Flower. Ooh, I got to buy this. And I did. It was on my bookshelf. I would pick it up and pull it out and attempt to read it. And Peter, it never, ever, ever made sense. And at a certain point, I was getting rid of a lot of things because I was actually leaving the country. And I remember picking that book up and looking at it and going, no, I'm passing you on, because whenever I picked it up, I so wanted to try to understand it, and I never, ever could. So maybe Cleary will help me. Or maybe there's other ways in. Maybe there's, I don't know, I'm going to ask you, because you're a novice. Could you get in through poetry? Can you get in through music? Can you get in through meditation?
I'm an experienced novice.
You're an experienced novice. That's what I'm looking for. I'm a novice. I need an experienced novice.
I've been a novice for a long time.
So are there other ways in besides books? I mean, is there meditation?
The only other aspect, I think, because I think it's important, if people find this interesting, if they would like to pursue it further, I will give you a few books and a website that they can follow. But I think also that a lot of these aspects already in Tai Chi, they're already in Qigong, because it's part of that same tradition, really.
Yeah, there you go. You just said it.
Maybe that's enough.
It's probably enough. Okay, so let me ask this. Beyond the books and the images, are there other ways in? I mean, do people get in through music or poetry or other kinds of movement? What are...
Music, I have no idea, and I don't know. I just don't know. Poetry, poetry is an interesting one, because a lot of these books are written in poems, but they're in Chinese. Never mind the fact that they're in poems. I have myself written something, which I will share with you. This is part... Don't panic if you hate poems. It's only 1.5 minutes. Or you could cut it off now. This is part of something I wrote, it's actually 2014, so 9 years ago. And this is called The Inner Alchemy Vision of the Body, not a very poetic title. And I'm going to read you just half of the poem, because I think it talks about some of these aspects that we've already been through, with some of the Chinese names. So here we go. This is the second half of the poem. Practicing this medicine needs more than knowledge and rote learning. It's a journey, unfolding understanding and discerning. From your own light to the starlight, guard the three treasures, Jing, Ji, Shen. Open the three gates, San Guan. Irrigate the three elixir fields, San Dan Tian. Feel the cycle of Xiao Zhou Tian, the lesser heavenly circle, where the Du Mai and the Ren Mai flow. From Hui Yin, Ren 1, through Ming Men, Du 4, Feng Fu, Du 16, to Du 20 by Hui. Yin Tang to Tan Zhong, Ren 17, and Guan Yuan, Ren 4. Feel the two-in-one interplay. Use the 6 organs. They're what you need to get the 3 flowers blooming from seed. Xuan Lu, the dark deer of the kidneys. Zhu Niao, the red bird of the heart. Kan and Li, fire and water, without which there is no start. Feng, the spleen's multicolored phoenix. Bai Hu, the lung's white tiger. She Gui, the gallbladder's snake and tortoise. And Qing Long, the green dragon of the liver. Mountain, field, river, sea. Put them all in the pot, in unity. All the stars, the moon and sun. Know the many, but make them one.
Welcome to Chinese Medicine 101.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. There's our roots.
But that's what's interesting, I think, about this. You know, these are people who are really searching for the roots of life. And it is definitely a part of healing and wholeness, which I think is why there is this unified relationship between Chinese medicine and internal alchemy. It's part of the same thinking. Yeah, it's part of the same practice, even if no one's heard of it.
As with so many paths that are worth putting your feet on, you're not likely to get all the way to the end.
Yeah.
Makes for a good journey, though. Makes for worthwhile. Transverse through, from birth to death.
Absolutely. And I think it's, in a sense, I think it's expansive, because it's not a tying down into material. It's a freeing up from material, which I think anyone interested in mindfulness would be interested in. You know, it is the release of the heart from the kind of jumpy monkey wishes and wants, and the galloping, disordered rolling of the mind. So I think it's an attempt at healing at the deepest level, while retaining the reality of life without denying it.
Well, that is a potent invitation, and probably a great place to put a bookmark in it for today. It's a good place to leave it. So, Peter Firebrace, Thank you so much for your time in this.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah. It's nice to hang out with other novices.
Quite.
Seems the experiences that are difficult to speak directly about do something curious with our perception. In a way, lead it inward and at the same time, send it outward. But in both instances, language falls away into sensation. Sometimes there is perception without comment, something of what perhaps Peter was pointing at when speaking of source. So often in our daily lives, it seems the impulse is to nail things down, make a list, and get things accomplished. And there is most certainly a place for that. That being said, this other side of noticing the unity within seeming opposites, that takes an active shift of perception. I so appreciated Peter's invitation to practice not mindfulness, but mind emptiness. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.